Hey gang, welcome to Big Brother and the Hodling Company. It's a podcast about music and Web3 and trying to fend off Big Brother. I'm a Keegan Voice. Today I spoke with my colleague Stephen Laddin, who's an LA-based, upstate New York-born writer and producer who focuses on creating content that normalizes underrepresented voices. He's written and produced a number of short films, and he, like me, derives great joy from interviewing artists and creators. He writes for spots like High Times and AskMen, and he hosts the Lights Camera Crypto podcast, which also sits beneath the Decential umbrella. We chatted about his journey, from baseball card collecting to discovering a love for entertainment to Web3 to finding inspiration in the voices of his interviewees. Hope you all enjoy the conversation. Here we go. Hey Steve, it's great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
I'm going to borrow the term that you used when we flipped roles in calling this an all in the family sort of affair.
Yes,
and
incestuous.
Yeah. And that's not as weird as it sounds for those listening. That is just one Decential writer and podcaster interviewing another.
Yes. No lewd visualizations, folks.
Indeed.
Very professional.
Get rid of those. We've done another one of these where I was in the hot seat, and now we are flipping that. And so now I'm interviewing you, which I'm excited to do. And I also liked your context is this is we're on a lot of shared correspondence, but don't often get a chance to connect and chat. So it's a good opportunity to really dive into each other's stories. So
Yes.
excited to do that.
Same.
So yeah, with all of these things, I like to start at the beginning and just get a better sense of you, who you are, where you grew up, and how your interest in doing this work started to first form.
First started to blossom, sure. So my journey began in upstate New York. I am a New York native. Grew up in a suburb of Albany called
Cool.
Guilderland, for those who may be familiar. We have a very prominent mall, which is the fixture of the town.
Nice.
And ever since I can remember, I think I had a burning desire to be creative. And I don't think I understood it at the time of youth. I knew there were things like when in elementary school, I was a good artist and I enjoyed those small crafts that you would make in class, or those books. I don't know if listeners had that experience or still have those experiences where you'd be in third or fourth grade and write your own little picture book and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But dioramas, all of those things. Really enjoyed creating, and much what we've talked about in terms of parental influence, mine were very similar to many others in the sense that they're like, Steve, as you start to get older, what are you going to do for a career? And it wasn't really clear to me that being creative or pursuing that path was something that was viable. I grew up with this understanding that a tangible career in, say, law or even an electrician, you can something that you can physically do
Put your
and
hands on
cause and
and-
effect,
Yeah.
make money in,
Yeah.
was the path. And so for me, sports actually were the impetus for a really long time. And much like yourself, I too played baseball and
Oh,
loved
nice.
baseball, loved football. Yeah. And really just when fantasy sports came about, at least for us in the early 2000s, fell in love with it. Would spend time. I would show up late to class because I was checking the stats from the night before. I would read the paper in the morning and see who was hitting home runs and all that stuff. And
Totally.
that, for me, was really what I enjoyed. Didn't let the artistic side go away necessarily. Writing was what my strong suit was, but certainly thought, okay, sports, I can see a more linear path to working in that field, and it's something that I enjoy. Fast forward through college, and at that time, it was my junior year, I had taken an internship at a minor league baseball team up in upstate New York, the Tri-City Valley Cats.
Cool.
And at the same time, had been talking to the Albany Athletic Department, University at Albany, where I'd had an internship there. And that, through just some alumni connections, led to an internship with New York Giants as their IT intern.
Cool.
And yeah, so at this point, in college, I'm like, okay, sports is the path. That's where I'm going. I don't know where it's all going to even out, but I'm in where I'm supposed to be. Senior year of college, a gentleman by the name of Mark Wilding, who is an EP on Grey's Anatomy. I think he worked on The Ellen Show, came and spoke to our screenwriting class. And it was at that point where I realized, oh my gosh, you can actually have a path in writing. That can
Mm.
be an option. So had a very come to Jesus moment or come to the universe moment, whichever, come to energy.
It's a good way to
Had a
put it.
very, existential situation and just sat with myself and was like, hey, Steve, where is this path for sports coming from? Is it coming from you or is it coming from a combination of you and what you think you need to do based on what your parents and what other factors of society has pointed you? Are you acting, are you moving forward on your own accord or are you moving along on your own accord with a plan that perhaps wasn't what is innately yours in place?
Right. Yeah.
And when I asked
Hard to
myself
dive
that
into.
question, pardon?
And I said that's a hard question to dive into.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. And so when I asked myself that question, as you said, very hard, but it made me acknowledge certain truths inside. And at that point was like, wait a minute. No, I think I am living out the expectations of others in this moment. And
Mm.
if I'm going to be true to myself, I want to see where this writing thing goes. I'm taking this entry level screenwriting course, but I really think that I know I have the skill set. I don't know how to apply it necessarily, but I can do it. And so that then led to those sort of a turning point where I just started to go all in on interests. And since writing was one of them, still enjoyed sports recreationally and fantasy and all of that, but had applied to it started this deeper dive. And without getting too lost in the details, sat in my room on a Sunday drinking a beer and realized, oh my gosh, all of the music that I'm listening to, these folks have representation. And at that
Mm.
time, there was no real understanding of agents and managers and all of those things. So amateurly, I sent out my college resume to about like 20 management agencies and was like, hey, I want to get involved. And none of them quite accurately responded to me except for one. And that was Silverback Management, and a Los Angeles based management company and with a record label on the side. And they are the founders, John Phillips, Matt Phillips. They represented Sublime back in the day.
Cool.
And yeah, and so they were the only ones who got back and were like, yeah, man, you're at the University of Massachusetts, you can promote our bands on the East Coast. And I was like, all right, cool.
Mm.
And their staple now is Slightly Stupid, and they're really some of the leaders in the Cali reggae dub scene.
Mm.
And so I ended up just promoting their work on the East Coast, was pursuing this writing thing, and then had this convergence of music, writing, and I was like, all right, LA seems like the move.
Mm.
That's where Silverback's based. Why don't I move out there? Move out, keep continue interning for them. Quickly realized though that if you want to be if you want to succeed in any particular field, if you're going to be in music, if you want to be in film and TV, be in film and TV. So again, another existential moment.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? How are you going to gear shift? And I was like, film and TV writing, that's the path. This has been a fun experience. Music will always be there. But I gear shifted, ended up taking a position at a reality production company, again, as an intern. That led to my first paying job at Creative Artists Agency, one of the premier agencies for talent representation,
Mm.
sports, etc. And that was really the start of how the career in entertainment and writing really came to fruition. And it was at that point where being surrounded by folks, again, it was tangentially related, but you're representing I was, and working with people who I admired and people who had careers that I saw were viable, and
Right.
talking to them every day, ended up moving through the company and landing in comedy. And really, it was there where my friends and some of the clients business and funds started to merge. And the idea of that as a path was solidified. And I don't think I've looked back since. The journey then was from there, working for a director, producer, and a writer, and really cut my teeth learning under these seasoned professionals. And ultimately went on into my own in about 2016. And that led to some early wins. Had a quick win, an early win that sort of validated that decision to branch out and onto my own collaboration with a good friend and collaborator, Francisco Ramos. He's a great comedian, and we sold this silly short digital short series to Mas Mejor, the Latino arm of Broadway Video company, of course, production company behind SNL. And that was again, very small win, but it happening within 6 months after going out into my own was the little boost that I think,
Yeah, it's huge.
yeah, gave me the confidence to say, all right, Steve, you may not know where this path is going, but you're on it. And it's been a fun ride since. Couple had a couple fun wins back in the fall of 2020. We had a short film. Again, Francisco and I co-wrote, and he starred. I produced a short film that got picked up on HBO Max, or Max
Cool.
as it's now called. It's
Right.
called Zoo Animals. License expired though this past fall. It's no longer there, but
Uh-huh.
still, again, it was the next level up. It was all right.
For sure.
Here's the next thing, and so now all of this has come together through writing in a couple different areas. One, traditional film and TV, which obviously, given the strike, it's a little stagnant aside from personal development. But the other avenue, which is how we have come to join forces under the Decential banner, is through interview work. And that all came about in 2019. Had a buddy over at High Times and Events, and I was like, hey man, I got some ideas that I'd love to try to write in editorial form. And so Mark Kaz, shout out to him, flipped me over to the editors. I pitched him a couple things, and they bit on an interview series with comedians whom I had a good relationship and friendship with, and started with just once a month, and then that kind of grew, particularly over COVID, where people had time and wanted to have a conversation,
Right.
to this thing with it was all right, comedians, then it was musicians and actors and filmmakers, and it blossomed into this more robust series that really just aims to understand, much like the work we're doing in Web3, understand the person behind the artistic product. And that for me has really been, and that's why there's a lot of alignment with the work through Decential, because it's essentially taking the same interview format that was happening with High Times and eventually AskMen, the men's health website, to uncover the factors that have helped people lead to success and how they were able to
Mm-hmm.
bet on themselves and find alignment in the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
That was a very long-winded way to
I
to give you the journey, but tried to give you
appreciate
a
it.
comprehensive look. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great journey. I have quite a few questions that I've written based on all of that, but I'm curious first in aligning, riffing on the comprehensive take of the work that you do and interviewing people across the board, across various industries, and diving into the qualities that have gotten them where they are. If you could distill any commonality across all of these people into, say, 3 bullet points, what do you hear most often when you're talking to people, or it just clicks, oh yeah, that was probably the thing?
Predominantly, first and foremost, I would say it's people started pursuing something, whether it was comedy or music or acting, because that was what they enjoyed for fun. And
Mm-hmm.
so the starting point was, hey, I'm doing this not because I want to make money, not because I want to have some grander picture. It's because in this moment right now, I'm fueling that inner child in me, and it
Mm.
feels amazing, and I'm having fun. And that, I would say, is bullet point number one, is the residing commonality is most folks who have had a semblance of success, large or small, started doing whatever they were doing for the love of it.
Right.
And I think that's very applicable to really anything, any facet in life. We're talking specifically about artists, comedians, etc., musicians. It's finding your passion and then living that passion would be the first commonalities. Second would be sticking with it.
Mm.
Nobody got to where they are by having an interest and then, oh yeah, that would be fun, and then not doing anything about it. I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
I
Not
think
much
the
happens if
folks
that's where you're at.
totally. The other element there is taking action on those passions. It's one thing to And again, all of this is work that may not seem like work, but if you pull back 5,000 foot view, you can see how this is a process. It's identifying what you enjoy, what you're passionate about, and then taking the step of, okay, I want to actualize those ambitions and those interests and see where it leads. So I
Totally.
think bullet number 2 was curiosity leading to action. And then 3, just really leaning into who they are as people and as
Mm,
artists, not trying to conform to what they think people will want or what they think they have to be, and rather letting their own inner creativity, inner creative genius propel them to the work that they end up creating. And that those collectively, those 3 things across the board, I would say, are the blueprint that I've, at least from my perspective, that I've gleaned as the foundational roadmap for any type of longevity in any particular field.
cool. Yeah, those all resonate. And I would love to dive into how you've mapped that blueprint onto your own life. But first, I want to take a step back and talk about baseball. I hardly ever get to talk about baseball,
Sure.
especially living in London where nobody cares about baseball. So you're from New York. Are you a Yankees or Mets fan
I grew
or
up a
something
Yankees
else?
fan. No, Dodgers fan now, but grew up
Okay.
Yankees. And back in 2000, when it was like 2000, 2001 era, I went to high school one day and just saw all of these bandwagon fans. And it was
Mm,
such a disappointment. I was like,
yeah.
man, these people talking about the Yankees don't even watch baseball. I
Mm,
was like, ah. And no disrespect to the Yankees, still always will have love for the team. But I was like, you know what? I want to find a new team. And couldn't like the Red Sox, obviously.
right.
Couldn't really like the Mets, even though
Different league,
the
but yeah.
different, yeah.
Mm,
And I ended up trying to think what teams have their roots in New York, if any. And then was like, oh, Giants in San Francisco, Dodgers in LA. And
yeah.
I was a Sean Green fan back in the day and an Eric
Sean
Gagne
Green.
fan. Yeah, yeah.
Eric
And
Gagne. Yeah.
Mike Piazza before he was a Met. And so just started following them and got into the culture and then subsequently had no plans. My plans to LA were not motivated by baseball, but there was some symbiosis that allowed the fandom to then be actualized once I moved here.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that was lucky.
Very, very could have gone in a very different direction.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that you're not a Yankees fan anymore. As a Twins fan,
Ah,
and how the Yankees always seem to beat the Twins every single time. Somehow it's the Twins Yankees in the first round of the playoffs whenever the Twins do happen to find themselves in the playoffs. And of course, the Twins never win. Good for you for moving on to the Dodgers.
it was, hey, they do something right over there.
Yeah, indeed. Where yeah, you mentioned like being into stats and fantasy and stuff. Did you collect cards ever?
Was a big car collector as a kid and had the binders with the plastic inserts and still have that collection, which is pretty cool. And predominantly baseball, but got dabbled a little bit into football and basketball and to
Mm-hmm.
hockey. It was across the board, but yeah, really enjoyed the card collecting. And I think fantasy sports were the next evolution just of that passion for
Yeah,
players and stats and everything like that. And to this day, shout out to our Guilderland Fantasy League. We still maintain the same core group of guys
nice.
from middle school. Yeah, yeah, we still get after it after 20 plus. So
Good for you.
yeah,
Cool. Yeah, no, I collected cards as a kid too. I never got into fantasy for whatever reason. I'm curious what if you're going to show somebody your card collection, like what's the one card you would pull out and be like, "Can you believe I have this thing?"
I'd have to go back through and look. I'm not as diligent about what's within those binders as I
Hmm,
probably should be. But I think it would be. I think within the past 3 or 4 years, I did do a little trip down memory lane to see what popped up. I think there's a at this point. I don't think it's a rarity, but there was a Ken Griffey Dream.
1989 Upper Deck.
I think it was the Dream Team one where it's black and white,
Ah,
and
okay.
yeah, I forget what the title is, but yeah, he that was a jewel in there. And I think I had a pretty prominent either Ken Griffey or Don Mattingly card. Here's what I do remember about my collection. I had a really awesome card in like 4th grade, and
Hmm,
we had a this was like the boom of the trading card explosion. And there was
hmm,
a dude, no knocks on him now, but I remember this kid Sean was in the grade above me, and he had a solid rip. He ripped me with this Mickey Mantle. It was like a cereal box card, but it was a mantle. And I was like, I'm young. I'm like, oh, cool, man. And it was like crinkled. And I gave him a pristine Don Mattingly or Ken Griffey of some sort, and sat with that. Clearly, it's still
Yeah,
it's
it's made its
it's a
way
patched up
under.
wound at this point, but
Yeah.
definitely was my first time I got burned. I think in something,
Mm.
and it you move on.
Yeah, these things
You
slowly
lick your
learn.
wounds,
Yeah, indeed.
but people don't forget. Um,
Yeah. No grudges, except a little bit.
exactly, exactly.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for indulging me.
Sure.
I'm curious. I feel like the next one thing that we haven't really touched on that also we spend a lot of time with is Web3 and the
Mhm.
blockchain, another space where there happens to be a large group of collectors, different types of collectors, I think, with some of the same sort of tendencies and same motivations. And would love to hear a little bit more about how that journey started for you, how you first got pulled into that world.
Sure. So in 2017, I was doing some consulting work for a new media startup, Batmere TV, and was doing some basically trying to help grow their audience through videos with comedians and other content marketing. And one of the premises to, again, I think and the leader Sev, he's a great guy. And part of, they might have been just a hair before the wave. So it might have been in reflection just a tad early. But as part of the decentralized nature of the company and what they were trying to accomplish, they paid everybody in crypto. At the time, 2017, I wasn't really familiar with what that meant fully. And
Mhm.
at the time, would have to extract payments. Again, this was early on when I set forth to onto my own journey. So I was using those funds that I had to transfer from one account, one exchange to a wallet, and then take the wallet, send it to my bank. It was a very layered, somewhat convoluted process that in hindsight, I'm paying rent with Bitcoin. And
Yeah.
so that was the introduction, and didn't really think much about the practical use of Web3 technology or blockchain technology. I just understood it to be a newer way to send funds and access funds. And then cut
Right.
to 2019, 2020, and there's, I think, a deeper understanding of utility and how blockchain is emerging and Ethereum pops, and all of this sort of gets me interested in the same way that I was interested in statistics and
Mm.
baseball and
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff, and thinking of, okay, maybe take that same tenacity and interest in player statistics and start looking at tokens and start looking at what companies are doing and what are they attempting to solve. And all of that kind of culminated in parallel to the interview work with Decential and again a conversation with Leasing, our one of the co-founders, and
Mm-hmm.
initially doing the same thing that I've done for say cannabis with those interviews for Web3 and trying to normalize the conversation around individuals who are doing some very brilliant things in the space and trying to understand who are you, how did you get to where you are, what did you do to bet on yourself. Same pillars that we talked about earlier
Right.
with our artists. How is that same philosophy being applied in the Web3 space? And that was the journey to get to here now.
Yeah, totally. Cool. I'm curious how, if you could just give me a very general overview of the ways in which the blockchain tends to interact with the film and entertainment space. I spend all of my time basically with music and like sometimes more of the structural governance side of the blockchain, but the application to film is something that I also love is I haven't spent as much time with. So I'd love if you could indulge me again with a quick brief of how that interacts most commonly and what you're most excited about also.
Sure. So, two main ways in which I've seen and heard how blockchain is helping influence entertainment, particularly one is with smart contracts and the ability to, if it's art or you're well versed in the music area, if it is the ability to, in traditional call it film, television. There's a lot of people involved in that transaction of, say, if I'm a film director, I get and I make, we'll just make this up, $1 million for a film. That $1 million is then parceled out to my agent, my manager, any publicity team. And with smart contracts, there's a way in which you don't have to chase money, see where it's being held up. Everybody can get paid when the funds arrive to that person. It seems to be, through some of the conversations I've been having, a way in which, again, I don't think mass adoption or critical adoption or widespread adoption, we'll say, has hit yet, but perhaps in the future it will. And in so doing, it will make more efficient that process of helping all the sort of parties on the business side of things get paid out seamlessly, lawyers included, and really make that whole system of perhaps one entity trying to distribute funds to everybody else instantaneous and verifiable with the blockchain. From a film specific perspective, or film and TV specific perspective, I think engagement, fan engagement in particular, has been the area in which conversations around the technology have really focused. A good example of that is recently interviewed Tommaso Sandretto, who's one of the leads over at Blockchain Creative Labs. And he and his team helped basically create community around Dan Harmon's upcoming new show, Crapopolis, without having the show drop. So you see Web3 technology, blockchain technology interacting with fans on a whole new level. So if you're a fan of Dan Harmon's work, you can, without having ever experienced the show, get involved in the community, have input. And this is, again, an area of the technology that's helping advance the space. Have input into creatively in a micro element. You can help vote on what color you would like to see a character's, I'm making this up, a shirt, for example, or some minor detail. But again, it's that level of interactivity is enabled by the technology and is really helping fans engage with the properties, and the creators of the properties engage with the fans in really cool ways. So I'd say those are the two most prominent ways in which entertainment has and is continuing to embrace the tech, is on the fan side and the engagement side, and then also through smart contracts.
Right. So it's kind of like on-chain kind of splits, I guess, from like a payment perspective, and then like collectible NFTs that can be used to cultivate fan engagement and provide different utility and stuff.
100%. Not just for the sake of, hey, I have this piece from this show and it just sits in my wallet. No, there's practical applications that make it. I was talking to Sarah Buxton the other day, Bucks over at Gala Music and Gala Entertainment, and she was saying it's a next evolution of the fan club, and I think that's actually very true. It's fan club on steroids. It's allowing that engagement, that access to occur. And yes, it happens to be through that scary word NFT these days. But again, with a practical use, it's not just a JPEG sitting somewhere. It is a tool that can be used, if done well, to facilitate a deeper, more intimate connection with a piece of art, an artist, music, whatever, a TV show, as we were talking about. I think that's really the benefit.
Cool. I'm curious if you've seen, I was just talking to this music artist, Excelencia, who released a teaser of an upcoming album that he's put for sale on Catalog, which is like a one of one music NFT platform. And he put the starting bid at 32 ETH, which is a lot of money. And he explained to me that the thinking behind it, so if you buy it, then you become an executive producer of the project. And the way that he thought about it, he compared it to when you crowdfund something, you typically get a small amount of money from a large amount of people. And he was thinking like he compared it to like an independent film, whereas if you like you need a lot of capital in order to make a film in the first place. So he was thinking about it in the same way, like this I'm like giving this to you for an executive producer role, which should be a lot more expensive. I'm curious if you've seen any use cases like that of people using the blockchain to actually help them make film in the first place.
I think a good example of that is Nelson Navarrete. He's a director, Latino filmmaker, Emmy winner, or Emmy nominated filmmaker. And he has a project, Buscando America, right now, where they're doing just that. They're
Hmm.
using blockchain, they're using NFTs to create a deeper level of engagement with their community and to help drive ownership of whatever it is that they're making, which they're still figuring out as they go. But it is very much a film, and they're basically taking each step of the filmmaking process and using blockchain to give to fans, to give to supporters while taking us through that journey of filmmaking. So traditionally what is done behind the scenes, production, post, all of those stages, what he's working on is to illuminate those steps, but then
Hmm.
also provide fans and backers with real, it's a feedback loop in that sense. They're
Right.
giving to the community in some way through their drops, and then the community is getting back through participation and through the experience. They're creating a new way in which to both fund and shoot and create a film. So I think
Cool.
that's a top of mind, very applicable example to the question you asked.
Totally. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's like he's charging for backstage passes to the entire filmmaking process, where everybody behind, like basically everybody gets a ticket, gets to be a producer in some sense.
Yeah, and he can, and we have, there's a Lights Camera Crypto episode with him, and I think there's a Decential editorial that kind of, in a much more cleaner way than I just described it, kind of outlines how he and his team are doing that process. But yeah, it is interesting, and it's definitely cool to see how the tech and the creations are merging in a very tangible way.
Totally. Yeah, it's been cool to see people who are applying this to all the various stages of the creative process, from like giving people the means to make it in the first place, to having a more transparent, intimate connection with the art along the way, to like actually monetizing the content in a in very creative ways at the end. And speaks to like it's another tool for those people who are very passionate about what they're doing, who are willing to like pursue this what is still an experimental technology in order to achieve what they want to build.
Totally.
Which brings me back to the question I wanted to ask you that I mentioned that I didn't ask is taking those three distilled bullet points of all of the creators that you've ever spoken with. How do you think about that when it's mapped on your own blueprint? How do you apply these things to your trajectory in life, let's say?
Sure. I think first and foremost for me, they serve as reminders. They serve as when I look at my next steps or when I evaluate, should I get involved in a particular project, or even when I'm working on something that I'm working on, but it serves as a reminder to one, keep that fun place of creativity in mind. And really, I'd had a, I'm stuck, it's in the ether. I've been talking
Hmm.
to a lot about this over the past week with various different people. And it's a reminder to when you're stuck, get back to that place. When you're stuck artistically, get back to that place of when you were, I'll give him a shout out, Morgan Jay's comedian. We had an interview that should be coming out in the next month or so. And he said it really nicely. He was like, I like to get back to that place where I'm a third grader with that piece of construction paper or cardboard cutout. And that's stuck with me for the past couple of weeks, where it's such a beautiful visual. And it's true. It's like when you're stuck or when you're trying to wrangle a creative problem or any problem really, it's like putting yourself into that space mentally. And I
Hmm.
think it frees you up to find solutions. First and foremost, the bullet points serve as a beacon, I think,
Hmm.
to and a reminder to create and try to live in that space, at least from a point of creation. And two, I think they just exist as extensions in some ways, since I'm distilling them and then reporting them back to you. it's also a reflection of sort of my own personal beliefs. Like I couldn't share that with you and not fully stand by it, or else
Mm.
like I
Yeah.
guess I could in the sense of, hey, this is what I'm reporting on. Hey, these are the commonalities. But the fact that those conversations are about success and are about giving something to people that in any facet of life, creative or any industry, it doesn't have to be art or entertainment. I'm sharing them through the lens, my own lens of
Right. Through your
in a
experience.
way that I believe. Again, I'm not taking ownership of any of those stories, but I am agreeing with sort of the commonalities that have erupted and definitely wholeheartedly, I think, align with them from a values and motivation standpoint.
Yeah, totally. There's, as you're saying, like the takeaways that you're going to get from any of those conversations are going to be the things that are not only commonalities across all of these, but the ones that are most resonant to you. And so it makes a lot of sense. And they feel like very clear distillations of in wanting to seek these reminders or have these reminders. It feels like you've set these like pretty structured guardrails to keep you going in the direction that you care about going in.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it starts with curiosity. I'm finding out that information not because I think this is what I need to figure out, but it's because I genuinely I'm curious as to what are those moments in one's trajectory where they leaned in, they had the external validation from an experience or a conversation or an aha moment and recognized, okay, hey, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And really, it's just in some ways, it's influenced by the book The Alchemist and
Hmm.
trying to uncover a lot of what that book talks about, trying to uncover the real life examples of people, and then the more you uncover it, the more you start to see that those are actually patterns, and those everybody has who's had some semblance of success. They might be many small moments that have
Right.
reinforced their path, but at some point, anybody who has built a career on themselves for whatever, if you're a basketball player or a comedian or whomever, you took a chance, you bet on yourself, and you went through some process in order to do, whether consciously or
Hmm.
unconsciously. So it's as much as it's me seeking out answers that align with my own value system, it's also seeking out answers that really fuel and fill a curiosity.
Yeah. I do feel like we all are distinct autonomous beings, of course, but I feel like there is like these moments of curiosity, these moments of commonality. It's like when you uncover them because they feel a certain way, because
Mm.
it feels like you're tapping into something that is fundamentally human.
Yes.
And when something is that resonant, you remember it. Because I don't think they happen that often. And there aren't really that many things that you can really experience the depth of a human fundamental. So when you do, you pay attention and you remember them. And
Yes.
it makes sense for those to spur more curiosity and be a beacon, as you said, as you try to live as best you can.
Yeah, that's all you can do is to continue to evolve and embrace change. And as you're saying, you just pay attention. It's all of those commonalities are around us. And if we tap into that frequency, I think we'll be a little more aware that they exist. And I
Yeah.
guess that's the other thing. You mentioned Beacon. It's very akin to that. It's showing up, hearing a story, and then being able to say, ah, okay, this is, it's almost like you're hearing words and then a map erupts in front of you and you can say, okay,
Yeah.
hey, I see it. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully that also makes us kinder, more empathetic beings as well, because we're tapping into something that is a shared experience across all peoples. And
Totally.
so there's a lot of good that can come out from being curious and inquiring about people's stories and talking through them.
I think so. I think so. And it's also a great way to bridge divides,
Totally.
getting over fears, learning about genuinely, not just going through the motions of having a conversation, but taking that curiosity seriously and allowing yourself to be exposed to new opinions, new ideas. And that's right. Isn't that how we all grow and advance. I think that's the spice of life, as they say.
Yeah, indeed. Variety. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Through this exercise, we have proven that that works. Look at all the commonalities that we've uncovered in each other just through that exact practice.
It's a beautiful thing.
Indeed. And that beautiful thing feels like a good spot to wrap things up. I typically ask this one question to everybody at the end of these podcasts. I'm actually going to turn it into a three-part question for you.
Okay.
The question I always ask is, you're going to a desert island and you get to bring three records with you. What are they? So there's that. Consider that. But I'm expanding that to two other parts, given the nature of your work and our conversation. One, who's your favorite baseball player? And two, which film or TV show has been made that you wish you had made? There you go. I just laid a lot on you. I know. Feel free to take a sec.
Yeah, this requires, this is not something you can impulsively answer.
No,
Desert Island, only 3 albums.
I don't know. It's an impossible question, but that's also the point. Let's see what bubbles up immediately. I'll hold you to it.
Sure. And first thought, I would say Californication from the Chili Peppers, for sure.
Nice.
Just to have that, I think there's each song on that album, you listen to it at a different time and you can hear something different or unpack something new or hear a different meaning to the lyrics. So I would say that one's rife with it goes well with time. If you were to take that album and you're alone on an island,
It's just like a fine wine.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. You have time to yourself to contemplate the universe. It parallels, it jives. On that tip, I would think too that any sort of classical music, of course, the greats, Beethoven, Mozart, if there's a CD that kind of encapsulates, I would basically go to, well, I'm stranded, right? So in advance, I would have handy in case that stranded occurrence happens. I would have handy like an iTunes collection of the best meditative classical tracks or ones for focus, whatever Apple has sometimes. And it would be a collection of classical music, I think, because one, it's for me, I enjoy it because you can have it while you work. You could use it while you're driving on a journey. You can listen to it while you're walking around the neighborhood, and it doesn't detract from you being in the present moment. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that would be 2. And then 3, I don't know, maybe any album from A Tribe Called Quest, just throw in some beats and keep the rhythm there, but also have the depth that they have in their lyrics. So it would be, I think that would be my pillar, my trio of music. Yeah, thank you. Thank them for all of those artists for their contributions to my deserted experience. You mentioned movies, favorite movie that I would like to make, that
a movie or a TV show that has been made that you wish you had made first.
Oh man, I think just because I saw it in the theaters probably 5 or 6 times when it came out was Superbad. I think just from a bromance comedy perspective, I admire the work of Evan and Seth and really think that they nailed it with obviously many more films, but that particularly had such a good, it worked for me on a lot of levels. I really appreciated that film.
It's incredible. Great. I haven't seen it in a long time, actually. I should go back.
Bust it out. Yeah, bring it out of the vault.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I'm blanking on the third question.
Your favorite baseball player?
Oh, like current baseball player or in life?
We can say if it's 2 different people, let's go with both.
It's a great question. Is it fine? Is it okay to not have a current favorite?
Yeah, I also don't. So you don't need one.
All right,
it can be just forever.
Yeah, I think the sport as a whole is the favorite, and that's not a cop out. That's just if Keegan doesn't have one either, I feel less.
I do have a favorite player. I don't have a favorite current player.
Current, okay, cool. So not having a current favorite, I'd say historically, man, I think I would say Mike Piazza. And the reason why was or is growing up, seeing him be a pretty solid offensive catcher and have the control they had behind the plate was, and again, maybe we call it pre-Mets Mike.
Pre-Mets Mike.
I remember being inspired by how he played both sides of the ball as a youth. And I guess we didn't get into this, but on a fun tangent, I'm still very much involved in baseball and reflect on him in a men's league. So we still play to this day.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and have been playing same core group of guys for the past probably five years or so. So he's a good. I want to strive to be that level of both a defensive catcher and offensive player that he is.
Yeah. So are you a catcher?
I am.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Makes sense.
And I do use those knee savers because otherwise, I don't know how
Got
those
no
guys do it
knees.
without. Yeah, man.
They have that name for a reason.
They serve their purpose and couldn't be more on the nose.
Yeah. Indeed. We'll leave everyone with the knee savers.
Yeah, no official sponsorship yet, but
yeah, looking for a knee savers company maybe. Cool. And lastly, where, if people want to follow along with what you're doing, what's the best place for them to do that?
Sure. So all works usually end up on my website, www.stephen.laddin.com. So that's not Stephen with a PH, that's STEPHEN, Laddin, LADIN.com. Or you can follow me on socials. It's at Sladdin, SLADDIN, both on Instagram and Twitter. And you'll be able to get the latest interviews, the latest podcasts, Lights, Camera, Crypto for Decential, and some other content as well.
Cool. You heard it here first, folks. So go give him a follow, check out the work that he's doing. And yes, Steve, I'm really glad that we're able to do this. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Big Brother and the Hodling Company. I'm your host, McKeegan Voice, and you can keep up with me and all the latest Web3 music trends on Twitter at McKeegan. That's MACEAGON. This show is a production of Decential Media, and you can visit us at decential.io. And remember, only you can prevent and fend off Big Brother.